So the years between 1948 and 1956, the time of the revolution, those years were after, like I was 4 years old, Marta was 5, when when Hungary was really given to by the Allies as part of the Iron Curtain bloc, Eastern Bloc countries. So we were given to Stalin, and family relations, of course, involve um, my mother's sister Iboya, who was married to a very instrumental figure in the opposition to the Russian communist takeover. His name was Aurel, and he ended up escaping in '48 because they were going to kill him. So he went to Austria, escaped, and he started Radio Free Europe and blah, blah, blah. So there was a lot of interplay between him and my aunt, who couldn't escape, and then later on tried and was caught and then was put into solitary confinement. And so that's like the backstory of Ibby, as well as Marta, because Ibby and Marta were close. And, my mother, I think my mother was 20 when she had Marta, and just turned 22 when I was born. And so that age difference between Ibby and Marta wasn't all that great as Marta was getting older, and of course Ibby ended up coming out to the United States later on, and but I'm jumping ahead of myself. So that period of time was very important, especially for Marta. She even started developing very early, even in Hungary before we left. So I'm not aware of her having any boyfriend, girlfriend at that age in Hungary, but I do remember that that she was she started becoming very entertaining and entertained by dancing, and that kind of whereas I wasn't. At that period I wasn't blooming in that area, and so but our friendship remained very close all the time. It's so close that there's not too many things to stories, because they were all just, we enjoyed camping together. We used to go camping with my father and his brother, and with my cousins, and rowing boats down the Danube together and staying in tents. And my father was like a not a pioneer, a Boy Scout, the Hungarian version of Boy Scouts, and he was very handy in the woods. So all of these things were taken up by Marta as well. She was she loved to go fishing with us. It was just, in fact, she loved fishing better than I did. I never liked fishing. I didn't like killing the fish. But anyway, and she was interested in cooking it and that sort of thing. It was like, she was very young age, and those are memories that when just before the summer before the revolution, my father met and married um, Yoli, who now, it was at that point that Yoli entered our lives. And for Martha, that was even rougher than for me, because for me it was very simple. There was no way anybody else could take my mother as a substitute. My connection with my mother was way too deep and strong, that I never, that wasn't the problem for me. But for Martha, it was also about the loss of her connection with Apu, with her father. And so, shortly after that, the revolution broke out, and we all got to escape. And Marta was a very willing participant in the escaping discussions. It was actually that she and I started discussing it because our cousin Aurel went and escaped to reach up with his father in Vienna, and he called back on the telephone, which was weird that you could actually make those calls without somebody listening in on you. So it was happened to be me that picked up the phone, but only Marta was home. Nobody else was. I picked up the phone, and as we shared this, we were both excited to hear him say that he was safe, my cousin Aura, that he was safe in Vienna, and he was urging us to escape soon because they knew that the borders are going to be sealed up again. There, a lot of the border guards just left. In fact, they escaped themselves to the west, and so the border was no longer. There were areas that were mined, so you had to be guided through it. So it was the scary part, and I remember Martha. We had to cross this creek, and there was no way any of us could actually jump across it. So, and my father ended up slipping and carrying Tom, and they both fell into the water. Tom was only 2 years old. And Martha's presence for me during the escape, she would quite often hold my hand, and we'd walk together. So we were a pair. We were, because everybody else did, either carrying packs or. So, I remember we helped each other across the creek. It was more me helping her in that part because I was a little bit more agile and more interested in water than she was. But we both got wet, frozen, and I just remember her taking me under her wings, even in the middle of the night. So things like this, but they were just normal. It was just the way we were. It was like, for me, how else could we be together? That's how close we were. There was no out of the ordinary. That was the ordinary for us, is to be caring and kind to each other. And of course, coming to the United States, that was a big waker-upper, because turned out that it was a little harder for Martha to learn English. And even though I was fairly quick in picking up the language, but more than that about the accent, I was very early on aware of how physically I would look at me saying words in the mirror. And Martha didn't care. She was just, that's why she would say, darling, and that Hungarian Zsuzsa Gaborish drama. She was expected to be like that because the kids thought that's what all Hungarians were or something. But anyway, she was good at it, and she was a lot more personable than I was. Became very shy in the beginning, and she continued to take care of me. And one of my friends just recently told me the story that one of the first sock hops that we went to in the high school, I guess it was 7th grade or 8th grade. Maybe it was like the end of 7th grade for me and the end of 8th grade for Marta. And that was like 1957. And we we didn't really know anybody. We didn't have friends. So she asked me to dance. And my friend said, that's what I remember. What are these weird people, that the brother and sister, and they're so happy together and dancing. And it was strange to them. And he reminded me of that. Well, this was just one example. And it was very much of her knowing that I was shy, and she was just pulling me into her circle. And that was that's how I went until we got up like sophomores in high school, when my language skills were almost natural, and I started athletically. I started standing out among the crowd and feeling a little bit more accepted and acceptable, so we started switching our role, even though I was her younger brother, but I started looking out for her. Through certain, well, nothing ever bad happened, but she didn't always date, kind of a guy that was just aware of her and appreciating her natural giving quality. And so she had some challenges, and I'm not going to go into that story because I guess we drew the line, but I was protective of her. Let me just put it that way. I was, and later on, actually, when I went away to college, she came down and visited me, and I introduced her to some upperclassmen that I knew, and it was about caring about each other's happiness, and of course that's from my perspective. I didn't always see Marta happy, but most of the time, throughout her growing up, her seeing her happy gave me a sense of solidity, or that it's safety, and anyway, so that and then I got married, and so it kind of separated us in terms of when I did go back and live in New Jersey, but Marta continued to be supportive of our situation, and I remember she was actually working as a nurse um, in one of I think it was a mental hospital, but it was not like a crazy house. It was like a place where people can dry up and do all kinds of things, but receive psychiatric care. And she was working there with another classmate of mine who had been a classmate of mine. And so he was telling me stories about Martha, how they used to do practical jokes um, with each other. And that was something that I didn't remember, except for the fact that when she went to see an autopsy, and I made fun of her because she came home not feeling good, and she said, "Well, okay, well you go," and she actually arranged for me to go through the same pathologist, and I got to see that, so that was life-changing for me. And so our relationship was, the way I saw it, is constantly being there for each other, being there for each other, with each other, all the way until the time when she married into a family of 6 kids. And I'm afraid that part of the story is where everything started changing for everybody, for the lives of the Josephs, the Bringards, and of course Martha and I. And that's a whole other story. But my memory